Okay, it looks like Commissioner Vaughn is here, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to call to order the Land Use Committee meeting for February 3rd, 2021. And can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioners Thompson,
Here.
Weingrab,
Here.
Bowman,
Here.
Fahey,
Here.
Vaughn,
Here.
All right.
everyone's here.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Our first order of business this evening is to consider the approval of minutes from December 2nd, 2020, and I so move.
Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
That's an I for me, sorry.
Zero, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, which is to land development.
Commissioner Thompson, I believe you are frozen.
I agree. What are we going to do?
Well, I think,
Yeah.
give them a minute to try to get back in, but
Who's the vice president of this committee? Or the vice chair?
I am. I can.
Back. I'm back. Sorry.
There it goes.
Sorry. Pardon the interruption and technology during these times of COVID. All right, give me one more minute here. Okay. Before I got so rudely cut off by my internet connection, I was in the midst of making a motion to recommend the Board of Commissioners approve the preliminary final land development application of Betawood Residential Properties LP for the property located at the Fairway to construct a 244-unit apartment building with associated improvements and grant all requested waivers, subject to the applicant's voluntary agreement to continue negotiations with the adjacent property owner to acquire secondary access to the property for firefighting equipment per Saldo section 146-41.B1D. Do I have a second on the motion?
Second.
Okay, and with that, Mr. Kaplan, we're going to turn it over to you to make any remarks that you may want to deliver to the committee. In the process of giving your remarks, all I ask is that you clarify for us what exact waivers you would be requesting this evening, as it didn't seem to be anything filled out on the form.
I believe, Commissioner Thompson, that the only waiver that is requested is, whether you call it a waiver or modification, of the dual two-access requirement of the Saldo. And I say modification as opposed to waiver, because as I think the board knows, following our last discussion about this application some months ago, when the board said that it did not want to exercise its power of condemnation to get us the the access easement that we would need for that second access, we engaged a fire protection expert, Drew Gerard. He's here. And we stepped back, and Mr. Gerard and Fire Marshal Roner and his people worked out a series of enhancements to our plan that, based on what I've seen, the fire department and Mr. Roner are satisfied that we've enhanced the firefighting ability and the protection of firefighters and residents to a significant enough degree above what we would be required to do under the IBC and the NFPA, that the fire marshal is satisfied with that. So that's the only waiver modification that we've asked for. It might be worthwhile, Commissioner, if we show you the changes that have been made to the plan since you've last seen that plan. So there were changes made for two reasons. Number one, because of the fire protection aspect of it. And then we have a new owner of the shopping center. Shopping center has changed hands twice in the last 3 or 4 years. And we had proposed a number of improvements to the center. The findings of fact and the conclusion of law back in March of, I forget, 19, I think, recognized that the then owner was somewhat on the fence. I see Brian Keaveney's on the list here. Brian had suggested that the easternmost access be moved over to the opposite Whole Foods front door. That made sense to us, but we could not get the owner of the shopping center at that time to agree to that change. We have since gotten that agreement. We have a number of other changes that we would like to present to you. So I would like to call up Chris Denoulis, our engineer from Bowler. And I think, Ashley, what you've got on the board, yeah, that's the plan that received conditional use approval. Maybe you got to shrink it a little so that everybody can see it. I'm only seeing part of it. Maybe that's the way I've got my screen set up. Let me just see if I change now.
Kaplan, right now we see the full plan on the screen.
Oh, you do? Okay, I'm seeing about 2/3 of it. So instead of me flying blind, Chris, just highlight this plan and show us where the changes have been made, and Ashley will bring up the current plan.
Sure. So as Mark said, the easternmost access was modified. You can see on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen there, Ashley, if you can maybe zoom in a little bit. You know, again, this was the approved conditional use plan. You can see the location of that easternmost access, that signalized access. That's been modified. We can talk about that when we bring up the current plan. Ashley, if you can pan over to the left-hand side of the sheet. This access, this westernmost signalized access, some modifications were made interior to the site, closer to where the bend is in the strip retail building. There's also been modifications to the lighting within the shopping center. And then the biggest change as it relates to the fire access is the driveway that makes its way up to the apartment building. So if we can switch to the more updated plan, we can talk about that in just a little bit more high level detail.
Sure, I'm going to go through the documents I received and let me know. Is
This one's
this,
good. Yep.
this
So
is
if
the
you could
change.
zoom in to that bottom right corner again, and we can kind of work our way from right to left. So you can see this access here has been modified. If you recall on the prior plan, that parking lot was still sort of fully open and you had access across, the running parallel with the fairway. So this access was actually shifted over closer, more in the shifted west, if you will. We basically added these concrete islands and created a throat to that signalized access point. And this access actually lines up a lot better in between the Whole Foods and the Baderwood Pharmacy, and really provides a lot easier of a truck movement for the loading operations associated with the Whole Foods. If we continue to pan over to the left-hand side, you can see, again, this westernmost access has been modified to provide for a little bit more of a fluid movement for both cars and trucks, accessing both the shopping center as well as the multifamily building. As I mentioned, you can't really tell on these plans, but all the lighting is also now proposed to be upgraded within the shopping center. All that lighting will now comply with the latest township codes. And then really the big improvement that I had mentioned is the driveway access up to the multifamily building. And actually, I think we have another slide that kind of blows that up and provides a little bit more dimensioning on it. Right, here you go. So the change that we made here was really providing a 2-foot wide mountable curb island down the center of the driveway, really to provide for 2 separate dedicated lanes to the apartment building. So we have 2 12-foot lanes that widen out along the curves to ensure that you have fire trucks will be able to stay completely within those lanes as they make their way up to the apartment building. You can see they're 2 12-foot lanes, but as you traverse through the curved sections, you can see that there's gore striping on each side of those lanes to provide a little bit more room for those trucks to be able to maneuver all the way up, again, staying fully contained within those lanes.
Mr.
So-
Denolis,
so-
before you move on, can you just explain a little bit more about what a mountable curb is in the middle of the road?
It's essentially a 2-foot wide curb that, you would have the ability, more likely like trucks would have the ability to bump over. You typically see them maybe as your shopping center where you have a right out movement only maybe, and you see those sort of concrete islands that look like you can roll up them, but you really don't want to. That's what this essentially would look like. That's basically an angled curb, if you will, with a flat section of concrete in the middle of it.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yep, perfect.
So again, we looked at the truck movements up here, and we looked at the most restrictive movements as well. So we have truck turning diagrams that, again, if one of these lanes happened to be blocked, the truck would be able to maneuver up the opposite lane, both in the egress and ingress movements. The other modification that we made, it's not shown on this sheet, and we could possibly go back to that overall plan again, is at the rear of the multifamily building. We expanded on the turnaround at that back corner. So you could see that large opening of asphalt in the rear there adjacent to the trash enclosure. So basically trucks will not need to make a K-turn movement, if you will, to get back out. They can drive all the way up and make a full U-turn and make their way back down out of the site. So speaking high level, they're the changes that were made on this last go around since the last time this plan was presented. So if there's any questions related to the site plan, please let me know and I can expand on that in further detail.
Okay, great. Thank you. At this point, I'm going to open it up to commissioners for questions, and I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Weingrad first.
Thank you. I appreciate that. First, I want to start from the beginning here about this project. It's a 244 unit apartment building that's being proposed. Is that right?
That's
That's
correct.
correct.
All right. And are these are apartments versus condos?
Well, the method of ownership is, I want to say it's not really relevant. Right now, we're talking about an apartment building that would be rental because there really isn't a great apartment condominium market. But yes, this will be a rental apartment.
Okay. And out of the 244 units, what's planned in terms of, are they one unit apartments, two bedroom apartments? What's the plan for this?
Fred, can you hear me?
Yes, I don't know. Am I on, Ashley? Can you hear me?
Yeah, this
Yes.
is Fred Snow, who's the president of Brandolini and who has been the moving force in this development since the start.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Commissioner Weingrad, the last, we built 230 apartments in Glen Mills recently, and it turned out to be rough 50-50 between one bedroom and two bedroom. I suspect this project being very close to that. If we have any three bedrooms, it'll probably be, less than 5%. That's really market driven, but usually mainly 1 and 2 bedrooms, but a pretty equal split.
Okay. And I'm not going to hold you to it, but what would you say a range of price and rentals you're looking at?
High as possible. That's a good question. These type of facilities nowadays, depending upon the smaller units versus the bigger units, so you're probably running $1,300, $1,400 a month to $2,000, $2,200 a month, depending upon the unit, and whether it's a corner or balconies and so forth, but in that range.
Do you have a particular target audience, or just anybody that'll come in to rent?
Well, I think just because it's near the train stations, we certainly suspect to get hopefully transit-oriented people. We certainly suspect to get, dual income, no kids type young families. And we also learned from our experience down in Glen Mills, we had a good substantial portion of residents that were 60 years and older, that it wasn't an age restricted community, just that's what they wanted to downsize to. So there is a market out there still, and that exists, that are a lot of people that have the older, the houses, and they've had them their whole lives, and their families, their kids are out, but they don't want to. They may have a place in Florida or the Carolinas, but all their doctors are up there, so they still maintain, a residence in their community because they don't want to leave their community. So we did find a lot of move down buyers like that, not renters, I should say.
Thank you, Mr. Snow. Now I want to turn my questions to the traffic issues here.
Can I just add one thing, Commissioner Weingarten?
Sure.
Alice, Ashley, if you could go down to the Whole Foods entrance. Chris kind of skipped over something I thought was important. So part of the change to the Whole Foods entrance is also a sidewalk that takes you from the traffic to the fairway all the way down to the Whole Foods. That did not exist before. And by reconfiguring the entrance and moving it and creating that road, we were able to fit a sidewalk in, which makes it a lot more pedestrian friendly. So I just want to make sure you guys were aware that you saw that.
Mr. Snow, just to clarify, so that's the sidewalk to the right of the drive coming in off of the fairway?
That's correct.
Okay. Ashley, could you highlight that just so everybody else can see it real quick? Yeah. Yep, that one. Perfect. Thank you.
Talking about pedestrian access, what's the plan with pedestrian access to the building itself? So if you say folks that live in this building, they want to go down to the Whole Foods, how would they get there?
There is a sidewalk that goes along the entire road going up.
Okay. So they would come down this sidewalk and then come around, I guess through the parking area.
Because of the grade differences, they wouldn't be able to make the connection until they got down to the parking lot behind the office building. The building that has the offices.
Right.
So they could go all the way down to the front of the center. They were going to Panera Bread or something, but they could also cut through and cut between the Panera Bread and the fitness club.
Now I want to ask you about the fairway itself, and I don't know, Mr. Snow, if you're the one to ask about this, but I wanted people to understand that there are improvements to the fairway as part of this plan. So, Mr. Kaplan, would you be able to talk about that? Or?
I can do that, Mark.
Okay.
Do you want to do that, or do you want it now?
I can do it.
Okay.
So this site, as you know, today has 4 access points that are all full access. There's the one all the way to the east that's next to Rydell Park that has full access every movement. There's the next one that also goes right in front of Whole Foods, full access. There's the one that kind of goes towards Panera Bread, full access. And then there's the eastern portion that's full access. So through a lot of the talk with the engineers and the traffic engineer of the township and so forth, there was a lot of talk about trying to limit the amount of access and so forth. So what we did is on the access that's closest to Rydell Park, it is now only a right in, right out. And we're extending the fairway median so you can't make a left in there and you can't make a left out. Because there's kind of, if you're familiar with the site, I'm sure you are, there's an entrance for Rydell Park right there, and there's a lot of conflicting movements there. So the next access along the fairway is now the new traffic signal that we just talked about that will take you right into the Whole Foods. That's signalized. It'll have pedestrian crossing signalization. Right now, there are 2 pedestrian crosswalks on the fairway. We're going to eliminate both of those and direct the pedestrians to go to the traffic signal where there'll be controlled access across by the pedestrian crossing. And then if you continue east a little bit, Ashley, the entrance that's currently in front of Panera Bread is a full access. Once again, we're converting that to a limited access. So you go right in, right out. And then if you're coming down the fairway east, you can you can still make a left into the car dealership that's across the street. So we maintain that so that when the car dealership, if and when someday it gets developed, it still matches up. And then lastly, going to the last entrance, which is the primary, let's say residential entrance. Once again, this is a fully signalized entrance. That's an improvement over today that has full access with no signal.
So
I would just add one comment, Commissioner. After we got our conditional use approval, I shouldn't say that, but after we got our variances at the zoning hearing board, we circled the wagons with the township. It might have been the first I guess it was the first meeting I was with Rich Manfredi. And Brian Keaveney, your traffic engineer, was there. And I think it's fair to say, and Brian will correct me if I'm wrong, there was a lot of interest in us limiting the accesses, making the whole area along the fairway more controlled. There had been accidents, there had been fender benders, the crossings for basically the older population that lives across the street had no control. And I think it's fair to say that working through this is the ultimate, this is what the township's traffic engineers thought would be the best solution. And it's ironic, but as there was a change in ownership, we've been able to straighten out where the Whole Foods entrance is, as Fred described, and it's much more controlled and it's got the sidewalk. So we're pleased with it.
But in terms of crossing the fairway, so there's going to be 2 access points or 2 crossings with crosswalk, or 1?
2. You'll be able to cross at both the signalized access points.
Okay. It'll be the kind of thing where you push a button and the light turns red and you can cross?
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. I mean, we're not going to, do you want to get into fire safety now, or Mr. Kaplan, were you going to wait to call your expert on that?
Well, you guys got to tell me what you want to do. I sat with Drew Gerard today and we went through all of the different things that are included. if you would like us to walk through all of them, Drew's here, he's very articulate, he knows his business, and we can do that. Your choice.
Okay.
Or,
I'll leave that up to Chair Thompson, how he wants to conduct this.
Mr. Kaplan, I think we would be interested in hearing that. I think we just need to keep it concise and make sure that the average person can understand what he's talking about in terms of engineering jargon.
that's why I met with him today. I wanted to hear what he was going to say, and I didn't want it to be the first time when we were here. So he can do that.
Perfect.
So Drew, the table is yours.
All right. Well, thank you. Good evening, members of the board. As they mentioned, I was brought onto the team to help address some of the concerns that the fire department had with only having a single access road. And I was asked to help bridge the gap between fire department response and building design. So the main concern that was communicated to me through this whole process is the potential for an impairment to this access road, essentially resulting in a delay to the fire department's ability to respond. And everybody involved in this project wants to ensure that both the tenants have plenty of time to safely exit the building and give the fire department enough time to gain access to the structure and make sure that the fire is kept in check. So we've provided and proposed fire protection and life safety enhancements both to the building and to the site, which you've heard a little bit about, that go above and beyond code minimums. You know, we want to mitigate this delay should it occur. So, and I got to tell you guys, this is a subject that's really near and dear to my heart. I have a brother who puts on bunker gear for a living and fights fires. So, you know, this isn't just a discussion. These are meaningful improvements that would help, you know, save my brother's life. So, truly is important. So, as you heard, Buller talked about the enhancements that they made to the access road that improved both the movements and the accessibility for the trucks. But there's a couple other site-related issues and improvements that I wanted to make sure I mentioned. We have proposed a second fire hydrant and a second fire department connection. This is where they hook up their hoses when there is a fire so that they can provide extra water and pressure to the sprinkler system. We put this at the rear of the building near that truck turnaround that we showed you earlier. And this was done so that it can provide a second option when they're staging their trucks on scene and provide them with options when they're setting up their water supply and attacking the fire. So that is not typical. That's something that we went above and beyond code minimums. And a second thing that we did with the site is—
Gerard, on that one, Ashley, can you just, and Mr. Gerard, can you direct Ashley to where that is on the site plan?
Yep, so it's on the north side of the building there. The actual egress stairwell is shown right there at the left end. So the hydrant will be very near to that door on the building side of the access road. Yep, right in that vicinity. Final location to be determined, but it's going to be within 50 feet of that door. And the fire department connection is going to be on the wall of the building right next to that stairwell as well. So this gives them the option to stage their first trucks on scene at the front of the building or the rear of the building, and will certainly be dependent on what they know about where the fire is in the building.
Perfect.
So does that help?
It does. It does. Sure.
Great.
Continue.
The other thing that we did with the site improvements is we optimized the underground water line design to provide as much water as we could for firefighting. And so what this means is we are providing around 3,000 gallons a minute to the fire hydrants, which is well in excess of the code minimum, which is in the range of 1,000 to 1,500 GPM. So we're providing ample water supply to these guys when they're on scene. So that's the site stuff. Within the building, we're proposing multiple enhancements that include a fire command station. We're increasing sprinkler protection. We're providing a more capable fire alarm system. We're providing smoke removal fans. We're increasing ventilation rates in the parking garage. And we're providing emergency responder radio coverage. And again, all of this is for the goal of getting people out safely and also to protect those firefighters who are responding to an incident. So the fire command station, the first thing I mentioned is typical in what, like a high-rise building. It's not required in a building of this type, but we felt it was beneficial to the fire departments if they have a central location to access all the fire equipment and the building plans, and it's a staging location for a fire incident. That is going to be on the ground level, the fire department access level, as they first enter the complex. So if you were to pan that drawing down, again, I don't think the final location has been fully coordinated, but it'll be on that ground level as they first approach the building. So, yep, as they turn up the access road, and it'll be right along that sidewalk that's adjacent to the building. So in addition to that, the sprinkler system, this is one of the most effective ways that we have to provide occupants with extra time to get out of a building. The fire sprinkler system is designed to control the fire, keep it in check, and we have proposed within the parking garage to increase the amount of water that's discharged. And what this means is, we're going to provide more water per square foot to control the hazard. The area of greatest fire hazard is this parking garage. And that's why we're focusing on this. It's also the foundation of the building, so we want to make sure that it's absolutely protected. So this is another area where we're going above and beyond, both to make sure that the firefighters are safe and the occupants are safe. The upgraded fire alarm system that we're proposing is not what you're probably used to seeing. It utilizes a voice evacuation prompt rather than horns and bells. This system can provide the tenants with a verbal description of the emergency and specific instructions. It's also able to be used by the fire department as a PA system so that they can put out unique messages, both to the tenants that are getting out of the building as well as their firefighters. So it effectively makes more useful communication during an emergency incident. This system really is going to be instrumental in encouraging tenants to evacuate by foot also. This is important to understand. We're going to encourage them to evacuate the building and get to a safe place by foot rather than getting in their cars and potentially congesting that roadway. One of the other things that we proposed was a smoke removal system. This is, again, not typical for this size building. It is intended to evacuate the smoke from the corridors within the building. It is of benefit to the fire department because they can quickly and easily purge the smoke from the building should there be a fire, and they don't have to haul in their own equipment and hook up. So this is a huge benefit to them when responding to a fire incident in one of the tenant spaces. Another improvement that we've proposed is in the parking garage again. This is the ventilation rate of the fans that are going to be down there. They're already going to have ventilation, but we're proposing that we increase the rates so that they, again, have better control of the fire. They can exhaust the smoke and the hot gases from the parking garage to aid in their firefighting activities. And the last proposed improvement that we've got is to include a emergency responder radio amplifier. This system is becoming a lot more common because of 9/11 and the troubles that they had with maintaining radio communication. This system is going to ensure that there's no dead zones at this property, and effectively it will improve the radio communication that the firefighters have while responding to the incident. So all in all, we've proposed quite a few enhancements to this building as well as to the access road, all in an effort to mitigate the delay. And we all have the goal to ensure that the tenants and the firefighters all walk away from this building with their lives should there be a fire. So with that, I will open it to you guys for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gerard. Real quickly, just going back to what you mentioned with the corridors and the stairs, can you just give us a little bit more on the smoke evacuation system and the positively pressurized stairs? I mean, what does all that mean?
So with the egress or the corridor, which if you pull the drawing down a little bit so we can see the footprint of the building, the corridor pretty much follows that dotted line that runs through the center of the structure. we see that there's basically the 3 entrance points from the stairwells, and then you've got the elevators. It's going to be a challenge for fire department to get in there with any equipment to do a post-incident purge of the smoke. So you got to imagine if we have a fire in an apartment unit, top level of the building, they got a long way to go to get fans, and they're going to have to create an exhaust point as well as a intake point for fresh air. This system that we're talking about installing is basically going to have a shaft going up through all the levels, and we'll have dedicated fans at the top of the shaft so that they, when they're ready to, they can kick on the exhaust fan and start pulling the smoke out of the corridor. This is not an active pressurization system, so we're not trying to provide smoke zones through stair pressurization or zone pressurization. Now I'm getting technical on you. I apologize if this is too far, but different systems, but both serve a very effective purpose for a fire department.
Thank you, Mr. Gerard. And I'm going to actually ask Fire Marshal Rohrer a question here, because my understanding was that we were going to see positive pressurization in the stair towers on this. Am I hearing that we're not actually getting the positive pressurization on those stair towers? And maybe that's actually better for you, Mr. Gerard.
Well, I'll defer to the fire marshal if he'd like to chime in, but I'm more than happy to.
I'm reading right through right now, Commissioner, but I believe that was part of the discussion, was positive pressure in the stair tower. That aided with the evacuation of personnel and also us coming in.
Right. Yeah.
So my discussion.
Yeah, and my question for you, Mr. Gerard, is do we have positive pressurization in the fire stairs, or don't we?
No, we don't have them. And the reasoning behind that, the requirement for stair pressurization comes from a high-rise classification, which this structure is not a high-rise. That was one of the things that we had discussed as, potentials. And it didn't make sense in this structure. If we had the extra height that would be required for it to be classified as a high-rise, then that would be an automatic requirement.
And Fire Marshal Rohrer chime in here, but my understanding was that all these improvements that were being proposed by the engineers were basically bringing this building up to high-rise code. Was that your understanding as well?
Not that it would bring it up totally to the high-rise code,
Okay.
but that it was above and beyond what they were actually required to do for that type building.
Okay. Okay. And hearing what you just heard from Mr. Gerard, are you comfortable without having positive pressurization on the stairs?
I mean, if it's appropriate, I'll comment now, Commissioner.
Sure, go ahead.
I'd like to thank Drew and his team. We spent many months with the fire chief and fire personnel going over this and trying to work out what was the best solution to provide the safest product for the residents and for the firefighters. The fire chief and the fire company walked away comfortable with all the suggestions and all the upgrades we came to. And I would like to point out that we talk about the driveway coming up. If Ashley has that up on the screen, the drawing and a plot plan, right at the top of that circle is where the original fire hydrant is located, right about where Ashley's pointer is now. Were that to be the only one, our first truck would block that roadway with fire hose. The addition of that second hydrant allows us to change our operations, allowing other trucks to access that scene a lot easier. So I just want to point out that was a one large addition to this plot plan. So, thank you.
Thank you. And Fire Marshal Rohrer, since we have you, what is your take on the building as proposed by Drew and his team? Do you feel that the building that we're talking about tonight is safe for the residents and safe for your responders in the event of emergency?
Yes, I do.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question before I turn it over to the other committee members then. Mr. Keaveney, are you on?
I am here, Commissioner.
Okay, great. Can you, as the township engineer, can you walk us through your assessment of the access drive up to the building? Talk about the width of the lanes, the concrete median in the middle, and your assessment of the turning radii as provided in the radii study that were provided to us by the engineers at Bowler.
Certainly. As was described, the original driveway was narrower than what's currently proposed. The applicant did take into account what I believe was the largest truck used by the fire services in Abington. I think it was a fairly sizable ladder truck. They used that maneuverability template on the drawing to scale to try and widen where they could to facilitate just some extra room around the curves. So as shown, you have upon leaving the straight section of the driveway, you have a curve to the right, and then almost 180-degree curve to the left to get to the top of the ramp and the front of the building. So both of those curve areas have extra width between the center median and the curb line to facilitate that truck movement.
Great. And Ashley, if you could jump to the other tab, the 45 truck. Yeah, that one.
This one actually shows the movement, correct? Yep.
Great. And Ashley, can you zoom in on the fire truck that's on the right-hand side? No, other side, to the right.
Yeah, there should be a symbol of the truck.
Yep. Scroll up a little bit more and scroll over to the right side of the page. There you go. Zoom in on that truck. Fire Marshal Rohr, does this look like the standard ladder truck that your fire companies would be operating should they arrive on scene?
Yes, it does. Through the planning process, I provided with the largest type trucks we have. All three ladders are Pierce Manufacturing. All follow the same standard.
Great. Thank you. And Mr. Keaveney, just looking at the plans, it seems like this truck and any other trucks that any of the fire departments in Abington Township have would be able to successfully navigate these access roads and access the site.
That's correct.
Great. Okay, are there any other questions from any of the commissioners that are on the committee this evening? And you can either, I can't see everyone's screen, but if you can raise your hand on the side or just wave. All right, I don't see any. Are there any questions from any other commissioners on with us tonight? Again, I don't see any, but feel free to chime in if I've missed you. Are there any questions from staff this evening? Oh. All right. Okay, are there any questions from members of the public this evening? Ashley, could you allow Ms. Lehman to speak?
Oh, God.
Ms. Lehman, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Yeah.
Okay, you sound kind of distanced and far away from your mic. If you could speak up a little bit, that'd be great.
You leaving me? What car are you leaving me?
I'll take it.
Here, Lauren,
Miss Lehman, we can't hear you. I think turn off the other device.
All right.
Here you go.
All right. Can I talk?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we hear you now.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me on this one?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah.
Please,
So,
please state your name and add at least your
okay,
name.
so I'm going to recommend.
Ms. Lehman, you have to turn one of your devices off because it's echoing.
Okay, so I had my other device off. Can you hear me?
Yep, you sound great now.
Okay, so, and that's the reason I had two devices, because at the last meeting, you did not recognize my hand up. And I have asked for you to spend time and put in a system both of chat or of a phone number so that these things could be worked out. And you continue to refuse to do that. You had, I don't know, 10 minutes at least at the beginning of the meeting where all those things could be tested. And
Ms.
that
Lehman,
wasn't.
Ms. Lehman, we
Yes.
worked through your technical issue. You're able to speak now, so please, can you direct your comments towards the application in front of us this evening?
Okay, can you also fix these problems so that we don't have them every time, please? Okay, so first of all, the waiver is not on the document. So the proper documents weren't even submitted for the public. Okay, and indeed, I wanted to ask, these are not a single property. That's the applicant. Are all three properties separately applying for this, or is one person allowed to apply for changes on another person's property? It's my understanding that these are three parcels and that they have different ownership. Am I incorrect, or are they all one owner at this point?
I'll ask Mr. Kaplan when your comments are concluded to respond to that. Can you
Okay.
go on with any other questions you might have?
Well, you know, when I get an answer to that one, it often leads to the next one. So, you know, that kind of an attitude is also a problem for the residents of this township. So Mr. Kaplan just put on a completely false presentation at Willow Grove Mall. Okay, and now we have here a situation that was caused completely by his designing a building that didn't have fire access all along the whole back side. And that access along the whole backside is now being mediated with, you know, well, we did this bigger and better, and we did this bigger and better. So now it doesn't matter that we can't get fire trucks around the back of this building. I want to know who allowed that design in the first place. And why do we allow developers to put things like this on us? He paid at least the $11,000 escrow. This has gone on for 10 years because of this kind of nonsense. And I want to know how much Mr. Kaplan has paid. That's my second question I'd like to have answered. Okay. And how is he allowed, you know, to present a design and have it go through when it's very clear that this is a problem in the very beginning? So
Ms.
how
Lehman,
many?
you have 1 minute left.
Well, okay, because I spent half of it trying to get the things working that you will not get working. How many units would Baderwood lose if they had designed the building properly? And they still have the option of designing it properly. Why don't you send them back to the drawing board and have them design a building where they can access the other side? How many units would they lose? That's another question I'd like to have an answer to. Okay. And again, I do want to make sure that you have open public comments at the end of this meeting, because it has been another tragedy to watch our public comments be taken away, which are our only option to have open public comments on open issues with each chairperson. And I want to make sure it's restored at this meeting, but those other meetings should all be restored as well. We should have been having 4 meetings
Ms.
tonight.
Lehman, your time is up, but your point is noted, and we will do.
Well, okay, and I do have
Ms. Lehman, your time is up. There's another speaker, and I do want Mr. Kaplan to respond to some of your questions. So we'll circle back to you at the end. Mr. Kaplan, are you still with us? Can you address some of the speaker's concerns?
Yeah, well, how much I was paid is just insulting, and that I defrauded the board in my Willow Grove presentation. So I have no desire to respond to Ms. Lehman, except the one question that does make sense. And that is, yes, we are going over 2 properties. When this property when it was zoned, back 3 or 4 years ago, there was a cross easement agreement that is recorded against this property that gives us this right. That cross easement agreement was reviewed and approved by the township solicitor back then. And I believe that, and Fred can tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the owner of the shopping center is an applicant signed onto our application when we submitted our land development plans some time ago. So that issue, that false issue was dealt with in great detail when the ordinance was enacted.
Great, thank you. Ashley, could you allow Mr. Morse to speak?
Paulie Morse Jr., 755 Glen Road, Jenkintown, Pennsylvania. This development is in my ward, Ward 7. I do have a couple questions. I know Mr. Kaplan said ownership of the property and the apartments aren't relative or aren't relevant, but one of my concerns is that the schools are certainly getting overcrowded and there's no commitment to single bedroom or 2-bedroom or what type. And the concern is what impact is this going to have on our Abington schools? It could be significant, and I think the commissioners should take that into account. Another thing is back in 2019, I spoke about the lack of a fire lane in the back, and I still don't see that. I understand that there's a fire hydrant. I still think that that is insufficient for the building, the residents that are facing that particular way. I don't think that's dealing with the health, safety, and welfare of the Abington community. And also, I'm concerned about the 2 traffic lights on the fairways. Right now, there's a lot of free-flowing traffic on the fairways. I use that often, obviously, being up in the Baderwood section. And it does flow rather smoothly. Unfortunately, with traffic lights and forcing pedestrians to use those traffic lights, certainly good for the pedestrians, but there's seldom been a problem with the people crossing because everybody's very courteous to those crossing. The concern is that it's going to back up, and how do we know what kind of control do we have in that area? I'm going up Hart Road, and my concern is all this traffic from the 244 apartments are going to start going up Hart Road so that they don't get stuck on Old York Road. That directly affects me and all of the neighbors. So I'm concerned about that area also. Those are my questions. I certainly have some comments when it's appropriate.
Great, thank you. Mr. Danilis, could you respond to any of the comments that were raised by Mr. Morse regarding traffic backing up at the lights? Is there anything you could add to that?
We have our traffic consultant here with us tonight. It might be more appropriate for him to respond to those.
Who is that?
Yes. Good evening. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay. Good evening. Matt Hammond with Traffic Planning and Design. As far as the traffic backup, we have done extensive traffic studies over the years on the fairway and worked hand in hand with staff as well as the township traffic engineer to determine enhancements that could be made to the fairway, because my understanding of the situation, the existing situation of the fairway, is there has been a number of accidents that have occurred over the years along the fairway. And by limiting the access points, by redesigning the access points, by providing 2 additional traffic signals with pedestrian accommodations, which, by the way, would eliminate the existing uncontrolled crosswalks on the fairway. If you're familiar There's two existing signalized crosswalks to the east and west of that eastern signalized driveway. And the fact that we are proposing to coordinate the signals along the fairway up to York Road, I think will actually provide a safer area through the township. Whereas now, yes, traffic is free flowing, and yes, vehicles will have to stop at the traffic signal. But again, it's more about the safety and about providing safe and efficient access in and out of the center, as well as the other users on the fairway, in addition to the pedestrian traffic.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, with that said, are there any other remaining comments from the commissioners before we go ahead and vote? Commissioner Bowman.
Yeah, I think ultimately our obligation is to review the fire safety issues, and I'm satisfied that Mr. Rohrer has said he feels he could fight a fire in the building. The fact that it's sprinklered, already increases its safety monumentally. So that's all really I think we have to look at to satisfy ourselves for the public safety and the safety of first responders. And I'm satisfied, and I'm prepared to vote in favor of the the changes.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay.
Mr. Thompson, if I could just jump in for a second, if that's okay?
Sure. Go ahead.
Mr. Kaplan, just to clarify, all of the issues in the various land development review letters are will complies, is that correct?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
And during the conditional use hearing, there was a discussion regarding if the township acquired a secondary access easement, that your client would be responsible for the costs associated with that secondary access, and that it's still a continuing obligation for your client, and you understand that, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. And the condition of the improvements to the fairway, you would agree to those conditions being made part of any land development approval next week when the board votes?
Again, yes.
And finally, if the board were to grant the waiver on the secondary access, but make it subject to your client continuing to negotiate with the adjoining property owner in an attempt to secure that secondary access, you would agree to that?
Yeah, that building is in play. It's been under agreement, not under agreement. There's 4 buyers now. Sooner or later, somebody's going to buy that property, and they're going to need our cooperation, and they're going to need your cooperation. And at that time, we'll be able to, I believe we'll be able to get that connection. It has absolutely no effect on the developability of their property. So yeah, the simple answer to your question is yes.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Mr. Thompson, that's all that I have.
Thank you, Solicitor Clark. Okay, with that, we have a motion on the table and seconded. As a reminder, the motion was to recommend to the Board of Commissioners the approval of the land development application in front of us this evening, along with all associated waivers and improvements. So all in favor of approving this land development application, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, motion passes. That concludes our new business for this evening.
And Commissioner, if I could, does that include passing it along to the full board with the waiver on the secondary access?
Correct.
Yes, okay.
It does, yep.
Mr. Thompson, which will be an agenda item on February 11.
Correct. That's my understanding, and I think understanding of the rest of us. Okay. Great. Thank you for those clarifications. That closes the new business for this evening. We're going to move into public comments now. Please raise your hand and let us know if you have any comments this evening. Ashley, if you could let Ms. Lehman speak.
Okay, this looks like you got my microphone this time. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine. Go ahead.
All right. So I'm not sure why that's not working, but please take the time at whenever we have it at the beginning of a meeting. I can get on early and we can fix and troubleshoot some of these things. I and others have been left out of meetings, which is problematic since the township makes no steps to try and fix these things. So again, there are so many things here, I can't even believe it. We're talking about you passing along on a property that has no fire access along one whole side, that you're passing along a waiver to the standard rules that you'd have normally if you had access on all sides. And you're doing it based on the word that the fire marshal said that everything looks good now, so we can not adhere to the code. And that is extremely problematic for me. We have the same fire marshal at the Colonnade, turned his head at so many things and then was elevated to fire marshal from assistant. It's mind-boggling to watch this stuff. So, and as far as Mr. Kaplan and the false presentation, what just happened down at Willow Grove, this is so important, that there was a presentation given by Mr. Kaplan 3 times. And a 4th discussion about the issue at the Economic Development Committee. And in all of those times, nowhere was it discussed the voluminous thing that he is zoning for there and what exactly it covers. But literally what he is presenting is an apartment building, but that is not what he submitted. He submitted zoning for a whole large portion of the BC district, if not all of it. And we deserve to have a proper residents meeting for all of those things that he has asked for to be described and explained and to have the papers in our hands. We were not only were the papers withheld, but the ability to have even a copy of the meeting was denied. So
you have 30 seconds remaining.
Okay, and Penn State is doing the same thing. They had a meeting without any ordinance or submission. Now they have submitted something and it will be withheld until the last minute when residents get to see it and try and understand what all will be allowed. They're doing the same thing. They're focusing on an academic building that everybody would say, well, that's not so bad. But what they're actually submitting is a whole entire thing for both college campuses to change and residential zoning also to change. And we deserve to have that and have our residents meeting beforehand. And Mr. Manfredi knows full well that that was not the residents meeting that was held.
Your time is expired. Thank you for your
can I?
No, your time has expired. Thank you for your comments. Are there any other comments this evening? Okay, in that case, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Anyone?
Second.
All right, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.